Today we're taking a look at the secret science of Freemasonry. Last time we took a look at how this 100-year-old Freemasonic book says that religion is fake. And today we're looking at the secret science of Freemasonry. This is part of a whole series on this particular book that we're reading, one of my favorite books on Freemasonry. If you want to watch that, check out the playlist. If you haven't seen any of those, that's okay. You don't need to have seen them to begin this book here. Now, as always, let's see, we're going to start, and I'm going to be, just sort of talking about this, also giving the Hyperion perspective as well. I want to always say I'm not endorsing Freemasonry. I'm not saying, oh, go out and join Freemasonry or anything like that, okay? We read a lot of different material here, whether it's from Freemasonry or Gnosticism or occult literature or philosophical works. We read a lot of different things here and look at them from the Hyperion lens and the Hyperion perspective. So let's bring this up as we take a look at Chapter 5, The Secret Doctrine, Science and Religion. The science and the religion, theology of the West are in perpetual conflict. Definitely agree with this. The genius of this religion discerns faith and miracles as its foundation. Science holds as its ideals fact and law. This religion, necessarily illogical, while science is materialistic and, thanks to both, mankind is as far from any real knowledge of the nature and destiny of the soul as it was 1,000 years ago. So they're basically talking about how science and religion are in conflict. Religion is all about theology and faith and miracles. And then science is about facts and law, and it's materialistic. Materialistic meaning in terms of ontology, meaning that science says that this is a material world and only material. All that exists is matter, and that's it. And the claim here is that this has been, a conflict between these two systems, and this conflict has kept people in the past from advancing in knowledge. Not practical use. Science is very good for practical use, but knowledge with regard to what they call here the soul. And this is very true. And this is why in Hyperionism we want to go beyond science and religion with a rational understanding of existence and the mind. So this conflict has long been maintained. And once again, the words, excuse me if I stumble over the words sometimes because they're very tiny, but I will do my best. Let's see if I can make this a little larger for me, actually. A little bit. Anyway. This conflict has long been maintained. It is a war to the death. Both religion and science are being reformed, and long before the battle ceases, neither of the original champions will be found to exist, except in their progeny of doubtful extraction or foreign parentage. A reconciliation has sometimes been dreamed of, but placed a long way off. So, reconciliation between science and religion, some people have dreamed of this, that they'll get along, that they will merge. But the idea of this happening has been placed far into the future, is what the author is saying. The theory or working hypothesis of science is mechanical to the last degree. Matter, force, motion, and law, without an underlying intelligence. And this is very all true. This persists the mindset of science today, despite the fact that the advent of quantum mechanics completely obliterated that possibility. Max Planck, the founder of quantum mechanics, said that there is no such thing as matter, that mind is the fundamental substance of existence. And Schrödinger and Heisenberg, all key figures of quantum mechanics, had very similar ideas. So really, science today believes in matter like a faith and a dogma, because quantum mechanics has obliterated that. And they've had to turn their backs on any sort of rational understanding of existence to try and explain quantum mechanics without appealing to mind, by trying to force things in there like randomness, which is an impossibility. Anyway, Matter is said to be essentially dead and inert, and mind is regarded as the fortuitous result of combination and aggregation known as organization. Yeah, so they're just explaining the materialist paradigm. The materialist believes that mind is dead and inert, that matter is dead and inert, and then somehow, through the organization of matter, mind somehow emerges. Again, this is fallacious, illogical, impossible. I've done many, many videos on why you cannot have an emergence of mind, an emergence of sentience. You can't take something that is mind independent, as science claims that matter is, and somehow from an organization of a mind independent substance for mentality, subjectivity, and sentience to just suddenly emerge. It is impossible, not just improbable, not just unlikely, it is literally impossible. Subjectivity is eternal. It's an eternal element. It's not something that can be created. You cannot create subjectivity from something that is subjective independent. Subjectivity just cannot be created in general. So let's just continue. I'm going to try, I get on such rants when we read, and on tangents that it usually takes me forever. So I'm going to try my best to just kind of move things along quickly, or maybe we won't finish it tonight. I don't know. We'll see. Whatever happens. Evolution is regarded as the result of modification and improvement by use and selection, and the increment carried forward by hereditary, in other words, of autonomy. So the theory of religion is that, so right now they're just contrasting religion with materialist science as how it was understood at the time of the writing of this book, which was 100 years ago, but it's still very, very similar. Science has refused to, get with the times and realize that matter cannot explain existence. They are very slowly, some of them are slowly starting to turn to panpsychism because they realize that the hard problem of consciousness is just, it cannot be solved through a materialist paradigm. It's an impossibility. Some of them are finally starting to realize that and go to panpsychism, but very, very few. And panpsychism is not the answer. It's mathematical idealism, which Hyperionism supports. The theory of religion is that of a personal God and an arbitrary and equally mechanical, though miraculous, creation, of a revelation equally miraculous of souls created as by arbitrary caprice of deity, with the accidental cooperation of man, even in violation of divine law. It talks of laws, but admits that their abrogation through the will of God. Admits their abrogation through the will of God. It is true that neither science nor religion has openly formulated the foregoing creeds, but they are fair deductions from the postulates assumed, the logical results of a nature without intelligence, and a God who creates laws only to annul them at his own good pleasure. Reconciliation between science and religion thus becomes impossible because each is a contradiction to itself. And so I agree with this completely. Science and religion cannot be reconciled. You have to go beyond science and religion, which is what we do in Hyperionism on ontological mathematics, which we call the science of the future. And that's why Hyperionism is not a secret society. It's not an empirical system. It's not an occult system. It's not a mystical system. It's none of these things. Hyperionism is a knowledge system. We want to be able to give humanity the tools that it needs to reach the next level of consciousness. That's what we're all about. It's about giving humanity the tools to literally reach the next level of consciousness. This is not like some vague, abstract, mystical idea. This is something very concrete. You can do this by using metacognition, concept networking, and phenomenological experience are the key concepts for reaching hyper-awareness. But, so there is agreement here. Science and religion cannot be reconciled unless they are transformed. Unless science becomes an idealist mathematical science. That is a science of the mind, which is what ontological mathematics is. If science transforms into that, and then religion dumps all of its insane, regressive, hostile, hateful, ridiculous ideologies, and openly admits that they're just stories that are useful metaphors, then we can have a world that is reconciled. And that's the world that we want. That's the world that we're working towards. So it's not science and religion as they are right now are completely incompatible because they contain contradictions. That's completely right. The only way reconciliation can happen is if they are transformed into something else entirely, and they are both compatible, and that science becomes an idealist science rather than empirical science. And this is what we want to do through ontological mathematics, and that religion openly admits that they are stories and metaphors and removes all the hateful, horrible elements to it. Then there's no issue. Because now you have just two sort of different ways to understand the same thing. One through rationally and mathematically, and then one through metaphor. But you're not believing them to be literally true. You're understanding that you're coming to a mediated, sort of intuitive understanding rather than a true rational understanding. So, and that's what we want. That's what we want. So now they're claiming here, but a reconciliation was reached in the secret doctrine ages ago. So this is what they call the secret doctrine, and we read half of it in last week's video. So if you haven't watched last week's video, or the video that's previous to this one in the playlist, go check it out. Because we talked a lot about what the secret doctrine is, which is essentially like the secret religion of the quote unquote secret religion of Freemasonry, this secret doctrine here. We talked about the lost word of the master and all these different elements. So they're claiming that a reconciliation was reached in the secret doctrine ages ago. The old universal wisdom religion was scientific to the last degree, for beneath both science and religion was the philosophy which discerned orderly processes of eternal nature with no missing links in evolution and no caprice or contradictions anywhere in cosmos. Now, so we very much disagree with this idea. So if you saw what we read last time, there's this idea about, trying to find like these old religions, this old secret fundamental religion, these old ideas, these, these secret truths and this old lost religion. And Hyperionism is not about that at all. Hyperionism is about looking to the future, cutting edge mathematics, cutting edge philosophy, cutting edge consciousness, using tools and technology and methods of thought to go forward into the future. We don't give a shit about, what was written in some ancient book, thousands of years ago or whatever. We're about going forward, learning, discovering, becoming. We're not about, again, I think I said this in the last, let's imagine that you found some secret book thousands of years old and it told you the secret of existence. What would that be? What would it be? You're not going to find the secret of existence in a book that is, thousands of years old. Where you're going to find it is in cutting edge knowledge and understanding and self-exploration and self-growth. That's what I said last time, is looking within, right? You're not going to find it in any external area. You're going to find it within yourself. And that's why in Hyperionism, so I say Hyperionism is about giving you the tools to look within. Because, right, I write books too, right? But I'm not saying that in my book, you will find the answer to existence. You will find the tools that will give you the tools to understand that answer to existence. You have to be able to find it for yourself. I can't tell you what it is. As much as I, can write about it, and I can write all about it all day long, the understanding won't be there until you have the tools to be able to develop that. It's kind of like there's a door, and I can't make you walk through the door. I can show you where the door is. I can give you the keys to the door, but I can't make you walk through it. That's what you have to do. So anyway, I just want to make this clear that, what we are about is giving you the tools to be able to understand this information. So, So anyway, they're talking about this secret doctrine, old wisdom religion. And they say the first postulate of the secret doctrine, already referred to, lays the sure foundation of this old philosophy. Okay, so now we're talking about this secret doctrine that is supposedly this reconciliation between religion and science. And so they are giving the first postulate of the secret doctrine, which is an omnipotent, eternal, boundless, and immutable principle, coeval and coextensive with space, in all, through all, and over all. Divinity immanent in nature, alike the eternal cause and result, each without beginning or end, and each alternating forever. So this is the thing that you know, the big difference here, in that there are a lot of things that are correct, but they're correct in a very vague way. They're correct in a very mystical way. And you'll see that it's stated outright rather than giving you a reason for it. And this is what we want to avoid in Hyperionism. We don't want to avoid dogmatic statements. We want to be able to give you information that is backed up by reason. So for example, if you say an omnipotent, eternal, boundless, and immutable principle, coeval and coextensive with space, in all, through all, and overall, divinity, immanent nature, like the eternal cause, whatever, that's great. And it is true, but why? Right? There's no reason given for this in this text. You see what I mean? It's just stated rather than giving you an explanation. You know, you can claim things all day long, but you have to give people a reason, or else it's just dogma instead of allowing people to expand their consciousness and thinking for themselves and understanding why this is true. So like, for example, in Hyperionism, we talk about this as well. And this is the principle of sufficient reason. And ontologically, if we want to study it mathematically, we can understand it as zero. So zero is, in Hyperionism, the and again, this is very complex, so I'm giving, you know, a very short, brief paragraph version of something that would be, you know, at least a book long. Zero is the fundamental essence of existence because zero is the container of all things. In Hyperionism, this is a mathematical idealism. So zero has the mathematical property of that it can contain all possible values, because if you have all positive and all negative values together, all positive and all negative values sum to zero. So within zero, you can have all possible values. So you have a zero that is not empty, but it contains everything. So in zero, zero is this omnipotent, eternal, boundless, and immutable principle. And why is zero eternal? Because zero logically is nothingness, and one cannot prevent nothingness from existing. Nothingness just is, it always is. And that's not just like a dogmatic claim, it's the property of nothingness. It's the property of zero. Zero is nothingness, and zero is something that cannot be created, and it's something that cannot be destroyed. And a good way to understand this is, you know, like, how would you destroy nothing? You can't destroy nothing, and you can't create nothing. Nothing is. And so it's eternal, it's boundless because it contains all that is. It is the container of all things. It's immutable. It's immutable because you can't, zero is something that you cannot destroy. Zero is indestructible. Coeval and coextensive with space. This is because it is, now they define space as very, very odd. In Hyperionism, space is what emerges when mathematics is in an asymmetric state. They have referred to space in a very strange way, almost as if it's mind. Anyway, but coeval and coextensive with space, in their definition, the reason why this would be is because it's all there is. So of course it would be coeval and coextensive with this. In all, through all, and overall, divinity, immanent in nature. So again, I go on long explanations here. But do you see the difference that I'm trying to get at? Rather than just making claims like, oh, there's this thing that's omnipotent, eternal, boundless, and immutable, coeval. It's true, there is, but one must be given reasons for why. And you see my brief explanation as to, explaining it as a mathematical concept of zero, how it logically and rationally must exist, how it's a container of all values, etc. And again, it's a very, very brief explanation. If we went into it longer, we could see how these values actually take on a form of sinusoidal waveforms, and these are frequencies that can be combined to create wave structures, etc. But let's continue, or else, my God, we'll be here all night. I could just do a whole stream on one page of these things. Anyway, and by the way, if anyone's out there watching as Freemasons, I'm not dogging on your thing at all. I am just giving, because a lot of people who watch my channel are Hyperions. So everything that we read and look at is through the lens of Hyperionism. So it's to show like what Hyperionism is and how it contrasts with things, certain things it has in common, etc. So I'm not hating or anything like that. I'm just giving showing the contrast. Anyway, Law in nature is the permanency, the unchangingness of the divine being. Intelligence. Okay, so hold on. So we've read here this beginning part. So law in nature is the permanency, the unchangeableness of the divine being. Intelligence in nature is the harmony of the divine order. Hence, the kingdom, the foundation, the crown, the beauty, etc. of the Kabbalistic Sephirah or divine attributes of Ein Sof, the boundless. And we've talked about this before in Kabbalah, dealing with the crown and then Ein Sof and the boundless, and how this is zero is what it is. But again, you see the difference between talking in terms of like the crown, the foundation, the kingdom, and beauty. All these are just sort of metaphorical story forms of something that what we define precisely mathematically. So anyway, the doctrine of emanation taught by Plato and held by the Gnostics and the early Christians gave the key to cosmic and human evolution. I've done so many streams about Gnosticism, so check out tons of playlists on Gnosticism. We've talked about that so much. And earlier in this playlist as well, they talk a bit about Gnosticism. So Plotinus said, God is not the principle of beings, but the principle of principles. And this is, again, we agree with this in Hyperionism, that God is not the principle of beings, but the principle of principles. And in Hyperionism, this is the principle of sufficient reason. And if you want to know what that is, I'm going to be doing a whole stream about it next Thursday, or this coming Thursday. So be there, or if you're watching the replay, it will be the video right after this one. We get into exactly what that is. This is going to be really important. But essentially, the principle of sufficient reason in Hyperionism is the founding principle. And this is a principle that for everything that exists, there must exist a sufficient reason for why it is thus and not otherwise. In essence, what it means is this is how reason itself operates. And it is the founding principle that gives rise to every other principle. And it can be, the principle of sufficient reason, for short PSR, is both the most simplistic thing to understand, but also the most advanced thing to understand. A lot of people have a lot of trouble understanding it, but it's actually extremely simple. It just means that for everything that exists, there must be a reason why it exists the particular way that it does, rather than some other way. There must be some sort of reason in like a causal way, not literally causal, but I'm saying I'm just, it doesn't have to be like, it doesn't have to follow physical causation or anything like that. It doesn't have to necessarily follow causation at all. It's just a reason. But we'll get into that more later, because that is going to take an entire video on its own. But anyway, so not the principle of beings, but the principle of principles in Hyperionism. This is the principle of sufficient reason. Mathematically speaking, we can understand zero as being the mathematical expression of the principle of sufficient reason. If we were to make the principle of sufficient reason into a mathematical statement, it would be zero that is the container of everything. And I'll get into that later, but we need to move on here. So universal substance, universal energy, universal law, universal life, universal intelligence are all emanations or manifestations of the one principle. This is true. This is not pantheism, but pure and unadulterated theism. Now, this is a little weird to me because it's not theism, it's deism in terms of what is being laid out in this book. Theism is a God that actually like takes interest in personal lives and intervenes. Deism is just like a divine force. And so, yeah, it's a little weird that the author describes it as theism. Don't really know why that is, but from the description given here, it would be a deism. Now, Hyperionism is a panentheism, and panentheism. Well, God, Let's just continue. The all is one, and the one is divinity. Spinoza came perhaps as near the... so the all is one, and so this is important as well, how they say the all is one and the one is divinity. So all is one and the all is divinity. So that's the concept of zero equaling everything, all possible values. And again, do you see how instead of making just dogmatic claims, there's reasons given for why a certain thing is the way that it is. That's a principle of sufficient reason. You see, that's a good example of the PSR. For everything that exists, there must be a sufficient reason for why it is that way, rather than a different way. So if you say something like, the all is one, well, by the principle of sufficient reason, you must give a sufficient reason for why the all is one, rather than just claiming it. Because you can claim anything you want. You can claim that God is a, giant cosmic space bunny pooping out the universe. You can claim anything, but you have to be able to give reasons for why that is, or else you're just in the realm of dogma and faith again. So the all is one is the concept of zero, which is equal to all things. So you see these numbers are very, very important, 0, 1, and infinity, because you can have one, a singular unity, which is 0, which is equal to infinity, if we understand infinity in a very specific way as meaning completeness, all that there is, rather than, or even boundless, rather than just an unending sequence. That's very important, because you can have the concept of a circle, which is infinite, but it is not an unending sequence. It is infinite in that it's a continuous loop. It'll just go. It keeps going around and around and around and around. There's no end to a circle. If you imagine a point traveling around that circle, it'll go around and around and around infinitely. Yet it is contained infinity in that, hey, there's just one singular circle. Anyway, let's continue here. So the all is one, and that one is divinity, and we know that this is in Hyperionism, that is 0, which is all, which is a unity, 1, 0, infinity. All important concepts, as long as one understands infinity in the correct way. So, and the reason why that is divinity is because that is, depends how you define divinity, right? We don't define divinity as like a bearded guy in the sky or anything like that. You can call it divine if you want. I don't like doing it. This is why in Hyperionism we kind of stay away from this religious language. But you can call it divinity if you mean divinity as the eternal substance. But that's what we are. It's the only thing that exists, so it's what we are. We are mental mathematical beings. And I'll get into this later, but I don't know if I'll have time, but let's just move on. Every atom of matter... Spinoza came perhaps as near the truth as anyone since the days of the old initiates. So Spinoza is an awesome philosopher who basically said that the world is God. Like God and the world are equivalent. God is the world. And Spinoza had a deistic, not theistic, but a deistic understanding of religion. And Spinoza actually wanted to create a rational religion. Like that was Spinoza's goal. I believe he grew up in like a very formal sort of Jewish religion, and he wanted to create a rational religion. And so if you take a look at his book, it's very cool because he tries to explain reality through rational postulates. And it's very, very cool. And so Spinoza's idea was that he was a rationalist, and his idea that God and the world were the same thing. And very sad, Spinoza ended up dying because he was a glass lens grinder, and he kept inhaling. He inhaled that, the glass, glass powder. So he eventually died because of that. But anyway, Spinoza is a very cool philosopher. We'll probably do a video about him someday. Every atom of matter, as every spot in space is full of divinity. Right. So every atom of matter as every spot in space is full of divinity. And the reason why this is true is because everything connects with everything else. Like everything is within this one singular system that is a unity. And so everything contains within it they're saying divinity, but this one substance, because everything derives from the one substance. So everything takes part in the one substance. So that's what that means there. There is neither time nor place where it is not. So they're talking about divinity. The priest initiates among the Hebrews knew this doctrine as they had it from old Egypt. Moses was skilled in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and neither Jehovah nor Adonai was the nameless or the boundless. Here in the first postulate lies the complete reconciliation of science and religion through the divine immanence in nature and within all space concealed. Every atom of matter is endowed with life and intelligence and boundless and bound by law. So, they're saying that this first postulate is part of the secret wisdom religion, and then essentially that it's the complete reconciliation of science and religion. Well, it's only the reconciliation of science and religion if science and religion are completely and totally transformed, not as they are now. And did it exist in this secret wisdom religion? The thing is, again, that even if this secret wisdom religion was, again, it's just a list of dogmas. So I think what I'm trying to show is that, like, how much of a better understanding Hyperionism through reason and mathematics and of all our techniques, metacognition, concept networking, phenomenological experience. Like, we have a lot of different techniques for depending on what aspect you want to explore. But it's not a list of dogma. It's about giving you tools, reason, understanding, knowledge, not just like claims. So here in the first postulate lies the complete reconciliation of science and religion through the divine immanence in nature and within all space concealed. Every atom of matter is endowed with life and intelligence and bound by law. But this is cool, right? Like, this, there's nothing. What they are saying so far, more or less, like with a couple caveats, but more or less this is right. Like, this is correct, which is cool. It's cool. It's just correct in a intuitive way. It's correct in a way that does not give one reason to believe, like reasons behind it. And that can get real dangerous, because if you are reliant on belief in dogma rather than developing your own rational skills, that gets real dangerous. Because what if you're now reliant on this dogma? You haven't developed the rational skills for yourself. You're just relying on the dogma. Well, what if some very dangerous claims are starting to be made? What if they, like, I think I used this last example. What if they claim that the fundamental essence of existence is like this male-female energy, so that, let's say, that like homosexual marriage, like, that's wrong, because it obviously that's not true at all. But I'm just giving you an example, right? What if a dogmatic, if sort of a claim is made and one is just taking in dogma, you're not going to be able to have developed that rational ability to be like, no, that's bullshit. You'll just be like, oh, I guess it's true. And that's why it's really dangerous, even though this is all correct in an intuitive way. And that's really cool. I just want to, and the reason why I'm so emphasize this so much is because, I really care about the people who watch my channel. And I know a lot of people want to dive into like occult literature and esoteric literature and stuff like that. And there's some cool stuff there, but it can get real dangerous, and you can start believing in real crazy things real fast. So I just want to make clear why it can be dangerous. So here in the first postulate, it's the reconciliation. Evolution is a formation, transformation, and reformation in endless succession, with the outposts of creation, continuity drawn upwards towards the center in divinity. Or space involves divinity and evolves cosmos. At the center of every atom or sun lies divinity, unity. At their circumference unfolds nature, diversity. And these two are forever one and at one. However, how any rational mind can fail to see in this philosophy a complete reconciliation of religion and science, it is difficult to understand. In the beginning, when the world emanates or begins to manifest visibly, space becomes turgid, called kurds in the old Hindu cosmology, with substance. The invisible becomes visible. This is the first matter, and it is called akasa. On the fourth side of coincidence with this turgescence prior to nebula, absolute abstract motion representing unconditioned consciousness, one of the two aspects of Benesse, latent potential energy becomes active. Latent consciousness becomes cosmic ideation. This primal energy is called Fohat, the mysterious link between mind and matter, the animating principle electrifying every atom into life. We now have matter, force, and motion, with laws, the guiding intelligence active and consciousness latent, as cosmic ideation, unfolding the plan. And all these in perfect concord, evolving in a symphony of creation, Of course, this cosmogenesis can be here, but roughly outlined. Okay, so did that make any sense to you? Odds are, if you're new to this sort of thing, probably not. And I think this really represents my point very strongly. Now, granted, the author did say, of course, this can only be described briefly or roughly, but still, all right. Do you see how vague this is? You have the invisible becoming visible. This is the first matter called akasa, which, the two aspect of Benes, which gives rise to the, this primal energy is called Fohat, the mysterious link between mind and matter. They even, say that it's mysterious. And by the way, Fohat is this idea that was used by H.P. Blavatsky, and in Theosophy, it kind of is popular. It has to do with Fohat is just this word for like the basically like the fundamental essence of reality. But I think you see my point in that it's all very like this. It's just not accurate. It's not rational. It's intuitive and very vague and very, very, very religious. Now see if we take a look at this rationally. So in the beginning, when the world animates or begins to manifest visibly, space becomes turgid with substance, the invisible becomes visible. This is the first matter, and it is called akasa. On the fourth side, with this tersurgence prior to nebula, absolute abstract motion represent unconditioned consciousness. One of the two aspects of Benes, latent potential energy becomes active. Okay, so blah, 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 blah. What my point is here is if you look at this from another direction, right? So let's take a look at our idea that zero is the container of all possible values. So if you look into Hyperionism and ontological mathematics, we show how this is able to form sinusoidal waves. And the reason why that they can form sinusoidal waves is because if we take a look at zero and we take a look at a circle centered at the origin is equivalent to zero, right? So if you take a circle, center at the origin, its additive value is zero. So a circle is another form of zero. And in addition to that, another form of a circle is two sinusoidal wave, sine and cosine. If you ever, took trigonometry, SOHCAHTOA, you know that sine and cosine, tangent, are intimately related to a circle. You can't have one without the other. If you have a sine and a cosine, if you have a circle, you have a sine and a cosine. I shouldn't say, it depends what kind of sine and cosine. I have to be specific about there because there's different amplitudes and frequencies. So to be more accurate, I should say, if you have a circle, you have a sine and cosine, right? Because it's another way of representing a circle. So you can have zero, which is represented as a circle, which is represented as a sine and a cosine. Now, because 1 0 is possible, you can have a multiplicity of zeros. Because 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 is still 0. It doesn't matter how many zeros you have. You can have many, 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 many zeros, and it's still 0. So that's logically sound. So you can have myriad zeros, which means you have myriad circles, which means you have myriad sinusoidal waves. Now, these sinusoidal waves can be represented as frequency. And then what we can do is when these sinusoidal waves interact with one another, which is basically just addition, and we live in this mathematical reality, there's nothing preventing addition. Addition is logically sound. Like, again, it's just something that can happen logically. And what happens when you take frequencies and add them together we know this by Fourier mathematics. Fourier mathematics is intimately involved in things like quantum mechanics and signal processing and image processing, and basically almost every field, engineering, electrical engineering, almost every field uses this because it deals with sinusoidal waves. And what happens is if you take sinusoidal waves, which we have by the nature of zero, by the nature of a circle, by the nature of what can possibly exist, if you take these sinusoidal waves and add them together via addition, you can represent them as space or time information. Basically, you can have, and this is what Fourier transform is, you can take frequency information and represent as spatial information or temporal information. So again, mathematically, you can represent these frequencies as space-time projections. So what happens here is that when these sinusoidal waveforms that have another property called phase, and they can be in phase or out of phase, or essentially have a property, have non-zero phase. If they do this, if waves are out of phase with one another, what this means is that their space-time projection is going to exhibit, you're going to start to get dimensionality. Because when all waves are perfectly in phase and equivalent amplitudes, it's just a singularity. It's just a direct delta function. It's basically nothingness. It's a singularity at the origin. But once asymmetry is introduced via phase, you start to get extension, you start to get difference, you start to get separation via the projection of these waveforms. And this is, intimately, like we use Fourier transforms in like holographic, understanding how the mathematical properties of holograms and things like this. So it has to do with wave interference, right? We know about wave interference deal at the level of quantum mechanics. We know about it with like holographic theory. Wave interference will give rise to these, the Fourier space-time projection that starts to give rise to extension. So, I guess my point is here, do you see how much more, now, and of course I know a lot of people may not know Fourier mathematics, some people may not know trigonometry, but even so, you can see how much more precision this is when we start talking about the fundamental nature of reality being composed of frequencies that can be represented as space-time information via a mathematical process known as a Fourier transform, and one can actually, get a pen and paper and do this and carry this out if one wants to look at the details behind it. Do you see how much more clear this is than in the beginning when the world emanates or manifests visibly, space becomes turgid, called kurds. In the old Hindu cosmology, the invisible becomes visible. This is the first matter and is called akasa, which is one aspect of Beness, and you kind of see what I'm getting at. Anyway, so we then have akasa as the universal substance, and Fohat as the universal energy with intelligence guiding them. Consciousness back of them, and the roots of all in the concealed Ein Sof, the unknowable. And remember, the Ein Sof for us is zero. So yes, that is the root of all things. Professor Crookes has taken a long stride in this direction in his metaphysical excursion in search of the origin of the elements and his postulation of protyle. He has thus further touched the septenary key in the order of the emanation of the so-called elements known to modern science. It would be impossible to work such as this. It would be impossible in a work such as this, and equally out of place, to undertake to trace the process running through millions of years by which a planet is evolved, how the turgescence gives rise to denser substance, set on fire by friction, Fohat, and how the fire mist cools and hardens into matter on our plane. Though apparent chaos here is cosmos, order and formation, as much as now may be discerned in this present state of our Earth. The real chaos is space, which is but latent potential cosmos or creation asleep. And see, this is what's really important about being clear, because when you start being using vague terms, because here they're claiming that the cosmos is order and formation and that space is chaos. Well, one has to be real careful here, because chaos is actually not something that depends how one defines chaos. And that's the important thing about, well, how do you define each of these things? What are the rigorous, specific definition of all these terms? What is the specific and rigorous definition of Fohat, rather than just the mysterious force between mind and matter? You can't just go, oh, well, there's Fohat, and that's the mysterious force between mind and matter. You have to be a lot more precise about this if to be able to claim, if one is claiming that reality is rational. And if you're not, if you're just going, oh, you're a mystical sort of system, you can make any claim you want, and that's fine. But I'm showing how it doesn't fit into a rational system. So a mystical system, yeah, you can do that all day long. But for people who want to understand reality rationally, it's a problem. So the problem here is through chaos, which is space, and cosmos, which is order and formation. Well, you have to be very careful of what do you mean by chaos? Because do you mean by chaos by just something that is very disorganized? Or do you mean literal chaos, which is literal randomness? So literal chaos is literal randomness, which is an impossibility. There is no such thing as true literal chaos, which is equivalent to randomness. That's not true. That's impossible. Now, if you mean chaos is simply disorganization, something that is not ordered very well, but could be, that's an entirely different concept. So one has to be, do you see how you can come to completely different conclusions if you're not careful with how you're going to interpret these words? And if you're using words like fohat and beness and chaos, and they're not accurately defined, you are going to, run into a lot of problems and different people taking away different understandings. And this is very different than a mathematical understanding where 2 + 2 = 4, regardless. Like 2 + 2 = 4. That's a very, very clear, rigorous thing that can be universally understood. Aliens could understand this, if translated into, however they have symbolically represented mathematics. You understand what I mean? It's a universal truth. It's and clearly defined that anyone can understand. So that's why it's important to be very rigorous about things. Tracing this process of world, and again, like I know I sound like I'm being very critical, but it's for the purpose of education, because so many people come to my channel and they want to learn all this occult stuff and mystical stuff, and I'm trying to show how Hyperionism is so much different than that, and if one wants to understand the world rationally, a lot more powerful than that, because you can get trapped in all these occult mystical thinkings. It's going to lead you way off track. So that's why, it sounds like I'm being real critical, but I'm not, trying to attack or anything. This type of stuff is much, much better than mainstream religion. It's much, much better than believing that a guy died on the cross and now you have to pray to him every day, or else you're going to go to the bad fireplace. It's a lot better than that. But I still, for the purpose of education, I want to point out very important elements here. So tracing this process of world building from the beginning, the one, negative, abstract space and abstract motion, the ineffable name or deity lying still back of these, nameless and never manifesting, now becomes active. And here lies the first manifestation, duality. Father, mother, spirit and matter, consciousness and intelligence. So, hey, look, do you see the danger here? Here lies the first manifestation, a duality, father, mother, spirit and matter, consciousness and intelligence. Now, they put father and mother in quotes, but do you see how this could lead to a dangerous situation? What if someone interprets that literally? And then, 100 years from now, someone's going, and let's say someone claims that this is like, the holy book says that father and mother are primal. As a manifested duality, they're the first duality. So, because of that, let's outlaw gay marriage. You see the danger in not being precise. Whereas if you're talking in terms of mathematics and in terms of sinusoidal waves, there is not you're not going to get, we don't want to call the sine the female wave and the cosine the male wave. Don't ever do that, by the way. I'm sure someone somewhere will try to do that. Don't do that. They're waves. They aren't gendered. But if you stay away from applying mythos like that, applying metaphor like that, then you're not going to have a problem, because you're just looking in terms of what a thing is. It's frequencies, it's sinusoids combining and manifesting in certain ways. Not like the father-mother principle, which is, you can run into lots of problems there. So again, really important to stay away from applying human invented concepts to what reality actually is. So we deal with sinusoidal waveforms, we deal with frequencies. These do not have genders. These are frequencies. Throughout evolution, we can ultimately become, involved in a world where the concept of gender exists, but that is a construct that is introduced. It has nothing to do with the essence of existence. And that's really important. And why I want to point out the danger in not being precise. Because I don't believe that this person believes that. Maybe they do. I don't know. But someone could misinterpret it as meaning that, and it could get really, really dangerous. Just like you have Adam and Eve. Oh, well, God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, so let's outlaw gay marriage. Yeah, a bunch of bullshit. Anyway. From a latent or potential duality, space and motion, there arises an active manifested duality, taking latency as the one, the first logos. We have thus the first triad, or the second logos. As differentiation goes on, the first triad becomes the modulus. Fohat lights the fire, sets the wheels, atoms, in motion, and cosmic ideation, latent consciousness becoming active, now gives form to evolving substance. Symbolize this, and we have the first triad reflecting itself in matter, a double triangle. And then in the footnotes, it says, in the Kabbalah, the Ancient of Days, the aged of the aged, the face reflected in the waters. Akasa is also called the pure waters of space. And so we have the first triad reflecting itself in matter, a double triangle or a perfect square, with the ineffable name inscribed in the first triangle. So again, this is, so now, like at this point, you're really starting to get off the rails here. So like this is not precise at all. And it needs to be, so, okay, because you could look at this as going, so symbolize this, and we have the first triad reflecting itself in matter as a double triangle or a perfect square with the ineffable name inscribed in the first triangle. And you see, this is all well and good, but it needs to be backed up by reason. Now, again, in Hyperionism, you can have, zero manifest as a circle, manifest as sinusoidal waves. And guess what? When you have sinusoidal waves, you also mathematically have triangles, because it's Pythagorean right triangles. So mathematically speaking, when you have a circle and you have waves, you also have triangles. And then so in additive Fourier transform, adding together sine waves is additively triangles, and then the projection of that is matter, and you could say that this was like reflected in the water or whatever. Now, do they actually mean this? No, probably no. No. I mean, they're not talking about Fourier transforms or anything. They're just it's just like mystical intuition that. But you see how you would never get to that unless like I actually explain it. It's so vague that one could, it's just, yeah. I mean, whatever. It's all well and good. Let's just continue. With the 3 reflected, making 6, and the name added, making the first septenary. This is the keynote of all that follows. The pitch, the rhythm, and the harmony of creation. The first octave in the song of the morning stars. The first septenary in the universal spectrum of color, and the first expression of the form into which matter is molded. So now we're talking about octaves and songs and color, which are all frequencies. Sound is frequency. Color is frequency. All this is frequency. Matter is frequency when you look at it quantum mechanically. Matter is frequency. Sound is frequency. Color is frequency. To synthesize all these movements in one word, we have Fohat as the agent, and vibration as the manifestation. Now, vibration is frequency. That's what vibration is. Vibration is frequency. So now you're getting to, again, I think you get where I'm going here. The master who knows the pitch, quality, and amplitude of the first vibration, who can produce this first septenary of sound, color, and form, can, by so doing, raise his consciousness to that first or seventh, according as we count from above downward, or the reverse plane. Such a one knows how to pronounce the ineffable name. It is not only a matter of pure science dealing with the laws of rhythm, a fact and not a tradition or a sentiment, but it implies at one-ment and knowledge and power between of all that goes to make up what we call and what we mean when we get nature. It is the consummation of human evolution, hence said the Christ, it is finished. In giving himself to the world, the perfect at one-ment was attained. In the ethical sense, that is on the plane of relations of man to man. The word is a renunciation or self-sacrifice. In the Hindu tradition regarding the master's word, there are 7 ways of pronouncing it, each involving a different potency and different result. And then they have okay. So look, with this, we're talking about the pitch and the quality and the amplitude of vibration and raising your consciousness and being able to control it and pronounce the ineffable name, etc., etc. So the ineffable name is, we talked about this last time. If you want to look at the lost word of the master and the ineffable name and all this sort of thing, it's a name of divinity, blah, blah, blah. And so this is what we know as zero being the container of all things, because it's not a word, it's a mathematical, it's a mathematical actuality. And it gives rise to vibration, which by vibration, I mean frequencies. They always, used vibration in the old books. In these old books, they talk about vibration a lot, but it's frequency. And so you have this idea of being able to, and so when one raises consciousness, they are able to become more adept at understanding existence and understanding reality. Now, if you reach a very high level of evolution, we're talking an extremely high evolution, yes, you'll be able to start to master control of these things. Because look, it says, it is not only a matter of pure science, dealing with laws of rhythm, a fact, and not a tradition or sentiment, but implies absolute at-one-ment in knowledge and power between all that goes to make up what we call man and all that we call nature. It is the consummation of human evolution. Hence said the Christ, it is finished, and giving himself up to the world. So what this means is that there's this idea of when you realize what you are, where you are, and why you're here, you realize that you aren't actually this avatar. Then this is the sacrifice. In Hyperionism, we call this, part of this is the metaphorical suicide, where you realize that, the metaphorical suicide is about destroying your current knowledge system and paradigm so that you can build a new one that's not infected with like faith and belief and all that sort of thing. So it's about destroying the old self to create your new self, metaphorically, of course. But this idea here is about when one realizes that one is not their body, one is not even this particular ego. Now, the ego is not a bad thing. The ego is what allows us to interact in the world, but it's not what we are. We don't want to identify it with it. And once we reach a high level of consciousness, you realize you aren't this. You're so much more than this, and that's kind of what it means by sacrificing oneself. That one realizes self-sacrifice. That one is more than this. And yeah, once one gets a very strong understanding and level of consciousness, you'll be able to manipulate reality. And we talk about this, but that doesn't mean you're going to get superpowers. You're going to go fly around, start levitating things. All right. None of that. So I hesitate to even talk about it here because people can misunderstand it to mean that. It means that once we reach a very high level of evolution, we'll be able to act in a way we will basically be able to construct our own collective reality, our own what is called a collective frequency domain, which is no longer, it's when we achieve planetary independence. In Hyperionism, this is called achieving planetary independence, when we as a collective no longer depend on a planet to be able to have our society, but rather can establish our own mental society in a collective frequency domain. And then, yes, at that point, we will have the ability to essentially control the frequencies of reality within our collective frequency domain, because those are the frequencies associated with us and that collective. That's way beyond what we're talking about here. So you can check out my other videos if you want to hear about that. But again, and so very, very vague. And now we hear the voice of the silent says, before thou setst thy foot upon the ladder's upper rung, the ladder of the mystic sounds, thou hast to hear the voice of thy inner God, the higher self in several manners. The first is like the nightingale's sweet voice, chanting a song of parting to its mate. The second comes the sound of a silver cymbal of Dionysus, awakening and twinkling stars. The next is at the plaint melodious of the ocean sprite imprisoned in a shell. And this is followed by the chant of Vina. I think you get it. I don't have to change this next to a trumpet blast. The seventh swallows all the other sounds. They die, and they are heard no more. When the six are slain, at the master's feet are laid, then in the pupil merged into one, become the one, and live therein. So, yeah, again, super vague, whatnot. And I want to be clear that I'm explaining all of this stuff in terms of Hyperionism. The stuff that I'm talking about is not what Freemasons believe. Freemasons are, they believe the stuff in the abstract way that is spoken about here. What I'm doing is showing how one can go so much further understanding things in mathematically in terms of Hyperionism. So it's not like Freemasons know about the things that I'm talking about. They don't. They're talking about, they stick to things in terms of like this mystical, intuitive way. So I just want, I want to make that clear because I don't want someone in the comments going, what are you talking about? Freemasons don't talk about frequencies and Fourier. No, they don't. They don't at all. They talk in these terms. And probably likely interpret them in different ways depending on the different lodge or different, even the different, because when you have words like this that are so vague, you're not going to get a totally cohesive idea. This is just like how in Freemasonry, they allow, like any religion, because they believe that everyone just who believes in any religion is believing just a piece of the truth or something like that. So yeah, you can have Freemasons that are of every religion. So, clearly it varies very widely with people interpreting these things, how they would like to interpret them. So while these descriptions are of symbols of sounds, they nevertheless represent definite vibrations in the ether or akasa, and he who has induced them in himself can raise his consciousness plane after plane to the seventh and become at one with the all. Yeah, I mean yes, but there's not like this 7 symbol thing. Okay, we have to continue, but in essence, yes, but it's a very, I think when a lot of people read this, they think, oh, wow, I can go and learn this in a couple years or a couple months or something like that. Depending on how one interprets this, if you're talking about just entering an altered state, yeah, you can do that, right? Like you can do it internally and mentally. You can reach a state where you are the absolute. And I'm going to talk about this a lot in upcoming things. But you're not going to become all powerful. You're not going to become Superman. You're not going to start levitating things. You're not going to become psychic. I think a lot of people think that and think that that's implied. No. So if one has to, and you got to be careful because a lot of systems will tell you, like the Rosicrucians. I don't know if they still do this. So I haven't kept up with what their modern system says. But yeah, Rosicrucianism used to be like, oh yeah, join us and at the whatever level, you're going to learn how to levitate objects and bend metal with your mind and different things like that. No, you're not going to do that. So got to be careful. If one has ever fainted or taken an anesthetic and remembers the rushing sound that precedes the silence, when consciousness ceases on the outer plane, he has a fact in his own experience giving him the key to samadhi. If he can produce the same condition in himself without fainting or chloroform, for example, but by a knowledge of the laws of vibration, then is he an adept and has and knows how to pronounce the master's word. I just have to keep going. Don't go out and don't use chloroform, okay? Don't do that. Don't. The designs on the trestle board for the building of the temple are the laws that determine the evolution of the higher self in man. Well, the execution of the plan or the construction of the temple in accordance with the plan means a transformation of the earthly tabernacle, the lower nature into a likeness with that other spiritual temple, not made with hands, eternal in heavens. This is again symbolized by the triangle within the square. The triangle in the square symbolizes potential before evolution, potential being before evolution, man in the Garden of Eden. The square in the triangle symbolizes regeneration, the purification of the lower earthly nature so that it may ascend to the Father, return to paradise. This is symbolized by the careful position of the compass and square in relation to the Holy Bible, while the 3 greater lights and the 3 lesser lights again make a double triangle. one greater because above, one lesser because below, which every Mason will understand. A few years ago, these explanations would have seemed to the great majority of persons purely fanciful. But since the recent progress in electricity and photography, since thought and emotion, like light and shade, have been photographed by light emanating from the human body directed by the human will, the philosophical synthesis of the forces in man is the next step in the search for science and the mystery of man. Wait, are they? Hold on. But since the recent progress in electricity and photography, since thought and emotion, like light and shade, have been photographed by light emanating from the human body, directed by the human will. So, I don't know what they're talking about. Thought has not been photographed. This was probably, so this was written what? In the early 1900s? At that time, there was a lot of crazy stuff going on. People were really obsessed with like electricity and vibration and seances. And there was a lot of chicanery happening. A lot of people doing like fraudulent seances, and a lot of people doing a lot of trickery with photography. So I don't know if perhaps this person is confused and had been duped by perhaps someone claiming that they have photographed thought or something like that. Maybe they're not referring to that. Maybe they're referring to something else, but I think that's probably what they're referring to. So yeah, just to clarify, you can't take a picture of thought. That's not possible. No. So it is precisely this synthesis which Masonry possesses in its symbolism, and we can only read the one by the light of the other, and check both by facts derived by experiments as science advances. Passing now from these broader metaphysical aspects to the complex nature of man, and we have also the key to his entire nature and evolution. We begin with the fact of consciousness. Man is not merely a bundle of organs or faculties, he is essentially one. What else can be the meaning of the phrase, man made in the image of God? So I think what we're going to do is continue this later, because now we're going to start talking about the divine and the cosmos as related to humanity. And I've already been speaking for about an hour, and I'm trying to keep these at least to around an hour. So I think that we will continue that later. But this, I think that this has been interesting, and I hope you understand the point here is that, yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff here. There's a lot of cool things. It's really neat, and I'm not dogging on it at all. In terms of people who believe it, who are into mysticism and all that. You know, my point is that when it comes to Hyperionism, we are rationalists, and we're not about, putting things in vague symbols and imprecise terminology. And, I think I've shown, and I think you've seen how Hyperionism, through ontological mathematics as well, is able to offer a much better explanation. And I want to make that clear. Once again, the explanations that I gave in terms of Hyperionism are a part of Hyperionism and ontological mathematics. They're not part of Freemasonry. Freemasonry is about these symbols and metaphors and whatnot, and explaining reality in this symbolic way. What I'm doing is showing what Hyperionism and ontological mathematics says and how it's infinitely more precise, right? So again, just to be clear, what I explained in Hyperionism and Ont Math is not Freemasonry. It's a different system, but it offers a much better, much more powerful, much more precise explanation. And that's important to understand. Freemasonry deals in symbols and metaphor, and our explanations are in terms of reason. And so I just want to, again, I want to make that clear, because I know some people in the comments are going to go, what are you talking about? Freemason doesn't believe in XYZ. And no, they don't. They have not heard of this stuff. So yeah, anyway, really interesting. Again, this is one of my favorite books on Freemasonry, and we're going to continue to read this book. We're going to continue to look, because there's a lot more. There's a lot more to this. This is only, I think, chapter 5, and I don't know, there's 10 chapters or something in here. It's very interesting. Check out the whole playlist I have on this book, and many more on Gnosticism and all the different things I've talked about in here. There's playlists for probably all of them. Check them out. And if you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so now. leave a comment too. Tell me what you like. Tell me if there's other books or things that you would like me to read. Let me know. Let me know what you're interested in. Let me know what you'd like. Also, if you enjoy my work, please consider supporting on Patreon. It is the best way to support my work. The link will pop up right over here in a minute. You'll get access to our weekly secret live streams, our hidden Discord server, the Citadel. And if you feel like you've ever learned something or gotten something or enjoyed my work, consider supporting, because this is how I'm able to do this. Helps out a lot. I appreciate it very much. And I want to give a big shout out to Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Michael, Angela, Maria, High Expectations Counseling, Jordy, Svetlin, Nicole, and Top of the World. And I think there's a couple more people that I have to add to this. If I haven't added your name yet, because it's near the beginning of the month, I will do so soon. But thank you very much. I appreciate all your support.